Hello, and welcome to Satisfactory. Today, I have a world to show off to you. One that I've been working on for 200 hours now. As you can see, with all the shenanigans going on, the stuff in the distance, we have a lot to explore. Well, let's just hop in the car and ride around, shall we? There we go. Now, for a little bit of background on this world, and myself. I have about 1,200 hours into this game. But I only have 200 hours into this world. So I have about 1,000 hours experience prior to starting this world. Another thing is, I do have advanced game options on. But I've played so many times that the progression is just not meaningful to me. I mean, it's good progression, but I've done it so many times, and I just want to build factories. So let's go to one of the most important builds in this world currently. And that is my power plant. And this power plant runs on oil, as you could probably imagine from the location if you're familiar with it. We'll do a little bit of an overview of the factory. It's not quite complete design-wise, and we're still missing some fuel generators, but currently my world does not need them, so I have not put them in yet. So on the outside here, we have a train station. As you can see, it's arriving into the station now. This train is not important for the factory itself, it's important for my trucks. This is the train that helps make turbo fuel. There may be a slight problem with the turbo fuel currently, but I'll look into that. But this train brings in sulfur and coal and exports its turbo fuel. And we'll see the production line of that later. Now down here is where all the oil is coming in. Now since all the fuel isn't being used yet, all the oil is not coming in. As fast as it needs to, I should say. But each one of these pipes is capable of bringing in 600 per minute. That is the maximum amount allowed with the Mark II pipes. And that is the maximum it's bringing in. So the oil comes up here and gets split into 3 different districts. Now if you do the math, which I have many, many times on this build, it's a little bit funky, but we need one that's slightly less than the others. Okay, my math might be off a little bit in this build currently. So slight correction on the math here. Each one of these pipes can supply 20 of these refineries. But there's 21 here, and then 21 over there. And then there's 18 here, I think. So I need to pipe some of this oil into the back of some of these. But that's fine. I redid the logistics here recently, so that is why that is happening. But I don't need this at maximum power currently, so that's fine for now. I will put that down though. So the first step into the fuel production line is to turn the crude oil into heavy oil residue. This is the best recipe to do it because this focuses on the heavy oil residue. The polymer resin is just a happy byproduct that we can use. So each one of these makes 40 heavy oil residue, which comes out to 120. Now these here need 30. So we need 4 per every 3 of these, and that's what's going on here. We have 3 and then 4. Simple, simple. But these also need packaged water, that's why we have this water packager. What we do here, we package up the water, we turn it into fuel, and then we unpack the fuel. Now when we unpack the fuel, we get empty canisters back. So we actually recycle them back on the same line. in an infinite loop. Each one is preserved to each one of the refineries. They're not connected in any way. Now for the packagers, this is where we get all our water. We ship it through here into a little waterfall looking thing and distribute it out onto the roof. With the 1800 oil per minute coming in, we make 8 lines of pipes. Now, if you know how to count, you may realize this is only 7. That's because one of the oil line, or one of the fuel lines, we turn to turbo fuel. Now you may ask, why don't I just turn all the fuel into turbo fuel? That's because turbo fuel kinda only requires, you need sulfur for it. Now you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's no way to make turbo fuel without having sulfur. And sulfur is actually very limited. It is one of the limiting factors in Factorio. It's one of the limiting factors in Satisfactory. Out of all the nodes in the entire map here, there is only 11 sulfur nodes. And you need sulfur in later production lines when you involve aluminum and eventually uranium. So I decided it's just better to just use only oil in this production. The only exception is with the turbo fuel, because trucks, I like trucks, and we'll get more into them later, but you need to give them all the advantages they can get. Anyway, since the trucks actually burn up the canisters and don't return them, we actually need to make them on site, which is handy because we can from the byproducts. We don't even have to worry that much. Since to turn the polymer resin into plastic, we need water. This is where this water comes into. It gets shipped up there. The byproducts aren't going at their maximum capacity because we're not burning the fuel as maximum as we can. When all is said and done and all that fuel is, cooking away, all of these guys will, be on and making plastic. And all of these will make the canisters. But if all else fails and this backs up, like this is doing now, we do have some awesome sinks here to make sure the byproduct doesn't back up. Now, one of the prominent features of this build is this giant tower here. And you may be wondering to yourself, if you don't know much about the fluid mechanics in this game, why do I have a giant tower? Well, fluid mechanics work very similar to how they would work in real life. In real life, water or any liquid can kind of push back up if they were in a U shape. So if we were to drop this, like demonstrated here, we have to push the fuel up to here. But once it goes onto this side, there is no need for it to be pushed back up. In theory, we could raise these back up to this level without using any pumps. So I just did that for simplicity's sake, so I didn't have to worry about pumps on this side. Which, this is what I like to call the bleachers. Because they look kind of like bleachers that you would find at football games or whatever. Now, I only have 2 rows complete. I think the 3rd row here is not actually complete. Correct. But this still generates plenty of power. The net power gain from the bleachers here, not including the production line for the turbo fuel, is 45,900 when I get all fuel generators in. But as you can see from the power line here, My capacity is above my consumption. And I have fail safes in check for if this ever goes above that currently. Those fail safes being the priority power switch. So it will just shut down the least important stuff. So it'll shut down some jank, the steel forge, etc., etc. Just to keep the rest going. And I do have quite a bit of battery charge. I don't know how much total. Here's the total amount. So that pretty much covers the fuel factory. Let's move on to the predecessor to the fuel factory. So this right here is my coal power plant. Now, it's not complete design-wise, and it may never be. Because I do plan on, or I'm thinking about retiring this build. It has served me well. It allowed me to build the oil power plant. But it's kind of run its course. Now this guy, in comparison to this like 45,000, this only makes 2,400. It is not that much, and it does take up coal resources. Now, the reason I'm hesitant to delete this is because I kind of like the design. I kind of base it off like a waterfall. So you have multiple stacks, and the water kind of, funnels down, and it's above an actual waterfall. I think the concept can work. I just don't know if I want to make this work. So I won't be going into the details of quite how this works, because it's just simple. It just fuels this. One thing I will mention is this is where a lot of my battery power is currently, so I would have to add that somewhere else. Obviously, it's a new power plant. I guess one current benefit at my current tech level, it's only using this one coal miner. So maybe it has merit, just because it's not using that much coal in the grand scheme of things. But I don't know. Maybe that's something the comments can decide. Should I keep the coal power plant and maybe revitalize it a little bit? Let me know what you think. So now we arrive to one of the builds that took the most time and still has more time to be consumed. Because I would want to change some designs about it, but that's neither here nor there. And that is the Construct Factory. That's this massive build up here. So let's go in, come in and park our car. And let's take a little tour. The outside is actually quite busy, so maybe we'll look at that in another minute. So the idea with the Construct Factory is just to be able to get all the bare necessities for all the other buildings. So we have a list of all the stuff here, currently. All this is being made either here or at the Steel Forge. Here's a couple of shots. We have a lot of moving parts in this area. Since the Construct Ford in its concept is kind of the main starting area, that's where I have my hub. And all my other stuff I need. Like my chest of random stuff. Like my nuts. Also, I don't know how I have 2 hub parts, plus the hub parts in this. Yeah. Now, to start the journey of the Construct Factory, I think it's best to start outside. So out here we have the iron input. So to follow the line of the iron input, all of it comes into these 2 conveyor belts and gets split across all of these furnaces. Every single one of these. And they're all, I don't want to say perfectly ratioed, because I'm using a tactic of, if you know the terms, this is like a mix of manifold and perfect split, using the speed of the belts. So we have a tier 1 belt here, which has 60 items per minute. So it takes 60 items per minute off the main line here, and it splits between the two furnaces, which equals 30 per minute each. And I do that all across the line here. So these furnaces never back up. I think this is an autosave. I was right. Anyway, the furnaces never back up. It has this nice effect to it, which I absolutely love. And we have one of my favorite spots in the entire factory, like right here. Because I split out the iron ingots in such a way that that allows like different belt speeds. We have like 3 different belt speeds going on here. Or is it 4? There's 4 different belt speeds, and they're all kind of necessary. So this is where the iron plate or the iron rods get made, and over here the iron plates. Simple. Now I won't go quite into all the ratios here because they're kind of complex, and it's been a little bit of time since I worked with this. But it clearly works, as you can see. So this line gets fed into here, and this makes the reinforced plates for the modular frames. And that's where all this comes into play. And as you can see, 100% efficiency. That rhymes because I'm cool like that. Now another side to this production line is the copper, which does basically the exact same thing as the iron. These 2 miners is where all the copper needed for the interior comes into place. It goes all the way into here and does its thing. Now we go to the second floor, where we have the storage here. We have the wall of all the items being made and processed here. We got a little museum to the basics over here. We have a view in for the truck deck. Now over here we have the production line to make reinforced plates. As you can see, doing everything it needs to be doing. We have the screws for the reinforced plates. And then we have the caterium processing, which is not that much. We don't have much caterium needed. Just got some quick wire and some of the AI stuff being made. But one thing to note, we can see all the copper coming from the smelters going up to the next floor. Have another truck viewing deck here. Working as intended. So this little section is actually the screws for the modular frames downstairs. They all get shipped down this little shaft. Correction, they're used for the rotors. This is where they come out of. In the corner here, we have the biofuel storage for use with the chainsaw. So we finally arrive at the copper production plant. Now, copper in the early game is only used for 3 objects. The copper sheet for pipes. The copper wire for wire-related stuff. And then cable, or cable-related stuff. Now, if I were to redo the factory part of this floor a little bit, I might produce more sheets and less cables, because this is heavily focused on cables. I don't think this really needs more wires because they're not used that much. But this makes so many cables. If we look at the output here, I want you to count how many cables there are versus the other 2 outputs. You see what I'm saying? There's one major area I have not shown yet. Now, obviously, all the cool outputs get put here, and this is where I can access them and, use them for builds and whatnot. Up here is like the logistics floor. It takes all the objects made from the entire factory and sorts them. Sorts them into the containers down there. And lots of moving parts. I love moving parts. It's my favorite part of this game, is the moving parts, if you could not tell. One thing to note, though, is before the regular storage container, there is an industrial container beforehand. And the industrial containers have 2 outputs. And I use them. And all the objects have these lines here. And they all go down below, which we saw earlier. And all of those lines come down here. They're stacked a little bit, so it's harder to see them. But each one of those lines are connected to a train car thing. And here we have the main output of this factory. It's the supply train, or the construct supplies. So arriving to the station now is the supply train. As you see, it's quite long. But now, since I have every one of these products onto a train, I can ship this train around the world and just take from the outputs and have all of these items wherever I build train stations for this guy. And as you can see, as it's going away, it currently has 1. Another thing to note, this is where the turbo fuel gets dropped off currently. There's no other stops, but there might be in the future. And we have little tractors taking around the fuel. So any one of these red little tractors are fuel supply tractors. They'll go supply fuel to the train or the truck hubs. And that's their job. Small little note, we have an iron outpost here for the trucks. And now over here, we have the truck import for the construct factory. This brings me all my steel products, basically, which are made elsewhere, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, if you played Factorio for a good amount of time, you know, trucks are headaches. I think their best use case, coming from, my 1,000 hours in this game, is stuff like this, where you make a product elsewhere, and you want it shipped elsewhere. Because the low volume, you don't really care if it doesn't get there in time. I think that's the best for these guys. Now, given I said that, there are multiple instances where I do have trucks shipping resources. One of them we can show here, which is how the Caterium comes into this place. If you wanted an actual 100% efficient factory, I believe that trucks and trains are not the best. Conveyor belts just win. If you want something to be consistent, if you want something to always work with no sort of shenanigans, although part of this world is the aesthetics, and I love the aesthetics of trucks and trains. I absolutely love both. And these guys are so stupid, and I love them. So I do use trucks more than I should. More than I practically should. Anyway, let's move on. We're going to head off this direction. But a couple notable features. We have the Caterium outpost here. We have a little bypass here for tractors. Now, the trucks can fit, but it's very tight. This gap is affectionately named Gray's Gap, because it's a gap in the rocks, and the rocks are gray. Creative, I know. So now on our way still, we have the limestone outpost. Now we arrived in our second busiest area of this world. The first being over there, and here's the second. There's not much more in this world, but we'll go over to Steel Forge next. Now, I've tried so many times with these trucks, but they are just something else. I tried to make it so where the trucks can come in, go to their stop, and then come out. But their turning radius is horrendous. And this design is destined to fail unless maybe you gave it like a lot more length. But how this sets up is now, I cannot have a truck dedicated per each one of these. Not practically, at least. So what I ended up doing was just have a bunch of trucks like kind of snake through. And that seems to work. But that's why the trucks kind of don't really follow the same. Well, I guess you could argue that this logically looks right, but they're trying their best. They're trying their best. Down here we have the fuel import for the steel construct factory. Anyway, the steel construct, as you can imagine, makes a lot of steel products. Here we have the iron, limestone, and coal we need for this production. Down here we can see we have the miners here. Now I want to note I have not upgraded these miners, so I could probably reduce them down to like just these two and ignore those two. So there's a lot more coal here that I can grab. We have the copper coming in here, which is like for rotors, I believe. And then the iron is coming from up here. So if we follow the production, most of the magic happens into these couple areas here. Now I'm using the recipe that where you smelt the iron before you make the steel, which I'm pretty sure just gives you more. It just gives you more steel. Like, it's such a simple thing to do. So it's like, once you unlock that alt recipe, just do it. It's the better recipe. That's what I'm currently doing. I'm separating them too. I believe this was limited by my belt speed at the time, but now I have all tiers of belts. But yeah, this is where all the steel for the steel factory gets made. Now, with the steel factory here, I had aesthetics not quite in mind as much. So here we have the, as I now affectionately call them, spipes. Steel pipes. It's a fun word. So all the steel pipes here get made. Some of them get exported down to be shipped off and used in, buildings and stuff. But these guys here get shipped upwards. I also, over here, make some... Over here, I also make some steel beams. Now, they're not as useful once you get past the tier 3 belts. But they're... I mean, I think they're used in something. Oh, yeah, they're used in the metal walls. Yeah. Useful one, guys. Up here's where our limestone gets turned into concrete. And we use the spipe and concrete recipe to make the encased beams. We still have some exports going on, but we have even more spipes going up. So here's where all our copper gets turned into copper ingots. Just a little room offshoot. And on the final floor, all the copper and all the spipes that are left over get turned into rotors. We turn the copper into copper wire, and we combine the copper wire and the spipes into rotors. I also believe we make stators here. Stators? I think it's stators. Stators?
Stator.
According to Google, it's stator. So we get the stators, and we get the rotors, and we make the motors. Who made these names? They're goofy. I love them. But that concludes the steel factory. There's a lot of work to be done on the steel factory, and design-wise, but it works flawlessly. Although I have considered maybe replacing it, but I'm not too sure. Before we get to the final building I want to show, this is where the supply train currently goes to. It is currently the only stop, but that doesn't mean we won't get more stops in the future when I build more advanced factories. There's a couple spots in this world I do want to show off, because they are pretty vital to the production of this world. Mainly because they produce stuff I don't produce in an actual factory currently. So here we have like a quartz production line, so we can make radio units. The quartz crystal and the silica. The silica mainly being used for glass, which glass is pretty. Down here we have the computer production line, which also acts as fabric, plastic, and rubber as a byproduct, along with a couple other things. So we're making supercomputers down here. I think I turned that off currently, though. And there's other things down here. Like high-speed connectors. I probably should actually store them. So yes, we're making the supercomputers. We're now going to be making high-speed connectors. Regular computers are here. I don't think I'm storing them, but sure. Circuit boards. And that's about it. So now we have probably the best factory I have on this world currently. Just from the grand scale of it. Look how imposing this factory looks on you. It just takes up the world. So we'll enter through the front of this building. I'm going to note there's a lot. I've built this very recently. There's still a lot of design choices to be made, and there's probably stuff I have overlooked. This is the heavy modular frame factory. We are going to enter via the main entrance, and we're going to fix that. So this will be the main entrance to the factory. To the right, we have where the train comes through. It can continue on that way, which I probably will do. I'm not too sure, but I'm thinking real hard on my railway network because, one, I want the trains to, like, I want a lot of the trains to pass through this area because I'm going to be in this area a lot of the time. But we'll see. In places like this, I want to be a high priority for trains to go through because it's cool. Anyway, so up we have the rest of the factory, but over here we have the truck depot, which I learned from my previous mistakes. So I learned from my mistakes, and this is the best way to do a truck system. A truck hub, if you will. Now, I could probably compact it a little bit, you know, in retrospect, but it wasn't needed. Give the trucks more space to do the derpiness. But yes, this is the best way to do it. And have them go through the truck stations. If you have them go through, there's no like backing up, there's no weird turns. They just go on through, do their thing, and go on and do their own thing. So this hub here has an export of the heavy modular frames that gets sent to the construct factory. We also import iron, compacted coal, limestone. If you remember, we saw the limestone outpost. The limestone trucks are very important to this. They bring in a lot of limestone. The compacted coal trucks only need to bring in about 500 per minute. Which, dear God, that number seems incorrect. I think that number is wrong. I think this number is wrong. Holy shit. Anyway, back to oh god. So this truck station is a little bit, I guess you could say, special. I did some math wrong. I know, me doing math wrong, insane. But I did math wrong, and I needed like 170 iron more per minute. So that's what this guy is. He just supplements the iron from the train that stops here. The train brings in most of the iron. So as the train arrives, with all its delicious iron, and here's where all that delicious, delicious iron is being mined from. I have 4 pure nodes up here. So they're being mined at the maximum that we currently can, which is 780. Belt limited, sadly. All that iron gets shipped into 2 cars each. And that's the ratio I want to use for cars in the future. Everyone is basically a normal node. And since pure nodes are 2 normal nodes, yeah, perfect. So what happens to this iron? Well, I'm glad you asked. Roughly half the iron gets turned into steel. This time we're using the compacted coal recipe for the steel production. And the other half is just getting turned into ingots. And then they get shipped on upwards. And that concludes... Oh. And we also, as a little side note, we have... The HMF factory has its own limestone supply. Just this alone wasn't enough. That's why we need the import. So now we go to the second floor. Which, the first thing you'll see is the concrete being turned into limestone, or the limestone being turned into concrete. I always get those mixed up. Now, I'm noticing an error already. Now, if you ever run into some random error that you just do not understand, my first advice, just rebuild it. Because if it's not working, it's just not going to be working. There's nothing you can really do about it, so just rebuilding is probably the best idea. Over here, we have the lovely, lovely spipe production. Now, a lot of these spipes are going upwards, I believe, to be used elsewhere. But some of these spipes are being put over here. Now, this isn't quite working 100% because it's backed up on industrial beams. Well, we'll figure that out later on the line. But yeah, now the concrete should be filling up all this. And then all the industrial... Wait, no, it shouldn't be fill. Why is it fill up on industrial beams? Excuse yous? You'll find stuff like this for a while after you build a new factory. Anyway, the industrial beams are made here. And then this is where the magic happens. This is where the magic... This is the goofier part of the video, because, I don't know. You know, I thought I caught everything, but apparently I didn't. But this is like the beating heart of this factory. The main reason why it's in production. And that's to make 20 these heavy module frames per minute. That's right, I have 4 of these, or I have 10 of these running. Each of these make 2 per minute. Now, it's not quite 100% because we're having issues, but we'll ignore that. It seems to be the industrial beams, which we could probably back up and fix it, but... It's making them. It's making them, so this factory is successful. Anyway, back up here. which this is backing up because that wasn't working at full capacity. So this couldn't work at full capacity. But we have the this looks so stupid. We have all the regular module frames being made here, which I believe is up to 100 per minute is being made here. Each one of these making 2, and yeah, there's 50 of the assemblers. Over here we have the reinforced frames, or reinforced plates being made. Now, the biggest logistical challenge here is not the plates. I can just run them through fine. Actually, the plates are a little bit interesting. I'll talk about them for a second. Because this needs more plates than the tier 5 can handle. So I'm doing a little tactic. It's like a double manifold tactic. I'm using a method where I'm kind of having 2 lines of plates, because I need more plates than the tier 5 can produce. And I'm sending them down both ends, which they then meet in the middle here. So it's like a double manifold technique. And then we have all our screw lines coming down from above. Over here, we're making iron rods. I decided to use the steel iron rods because they actually make a lot of iron rods for surprisingly little iron, if you actually do the math. And I'm making steel, so I just threw that into my calculations and I worked it in. So that's where the rods are going over here, and all that's being made. Now over here is the iron plates, which are used for the rods. Nothing special here, just a bunch of constructors. And we have the final floor, along with the screw production lines. Now screws are really crazy to work with because you kind of need a lot of them. This factory alone, if I check my notes, this factory specifically needs 76 of these constructors making screws, which comes out to 3,800 screws per minute. That doesn't include the logistics, which are a nightmare. We ignore these floors here. The in-between floors, that's where the shenanigans happen. Alright, we don't involve ourselves in those floors. But we have 8 lanes here, which admittedly probably could be a Mark IV belt instead of a Mark V, but I can't have a single Mark V belt coming out from one of these. So 4 of the lines just come down straight into the heavy frames and just get made there. Now another 4 of the lines get put here into the reinforced plates. And all of that complicated, all of this math that I've written down and did math for this project, all that accumulates to these 10 manufacturers. As I shown before, the heavy module frames come all the way down to the truck output, right into here. As we can see, we already have 50 in here. And the truck goes to the construction factory. And all of those heavy module frames made in the factory come right here for me to enjoy. Well, thank you all for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it. It's a little bit different than most of my videos, but, you know, I don't really have a consistent style. I hope you got some knowledge of Satisfactory. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I hope if you play Satisfactory, maybe you got a couple ideas from this video. And yeah, I will hopefully see you next time. I will keep updates on this world once I build more and more factories. Might do an update video every big factory I make. Who knows? We'll see. Well, as that truck absolutely destroys that tractor down there, that will be the end of the video. So, bye.